The blood rushed to my ears as Rick's voice boomed across the diner, silencing every breakfast conversation. "You know she can't pay, yet you serve her anyway? Do you want your wages docked?" His finger jabbed toward my chest, then toward the small yellow-jacketed figure hunched in the corner booth. Time seemed to stop as 30 pairs of eyes swiveled between us. Construction workers with forks midair, elderly couples frozen in mid-bite, even Martin the line cook peering through the service window. The little girl's shoulders curled inward, her gaze fixed on the untouched egg sandwich I just delivered. The shame radiating from her tiny frame made my chest physically ache. In that moment, I knew every single person in that diner saw me for what Rick wanted them to see: a foolish waitress breaking rules for a charity case. What they couldn't see was the carefully counted quarters and dimes the girl brought each day, or how she watched the door with frightened eyes as she ate. My name is Vera. I'm 27 and a waitress working through night school. This is the story of how I turned a public humiliation into the most unexpected second chance of my life. For 3 years, I'd arrived at Waverly Diner at 5 a.m. to prep for the morning rush. Construction crews, teachers, retirees on fixed incomes. The pay was barely enough for my studio apartment and student loans, but the morning regulars made it worthwhile. They remembered my birthday, shared classroom stories, split plates to save money, but always tipped generously. 2 weeks earlier, I'd noticed her for the first time. A girl no older than 10 slipping through the door at precisely 7 a.m. Her yellow jacket hung loose on her small frame, backpack clutched protectively against her chest. Without making eye contact, she'd slide into the farthest booth and wait, barely visible above the table. "Egg sandwich, please," she'd whisper, voice so soft I had to lean in to hear. When time came to pay, she'd count out crumpled bills and coins, always coming up short by nearly $2. I covered the difference from my tips and added a glass of milk. "Growing bones need calcium," I'd say with a wink. She never responded, but she ate every bite, eyes constantly darting to the door. The pattern continued for 2 weeks. 7 a.m., yellow jacket, quiet order, my discreet help. She never spoke beyond her order, never smiled, never made eye contact. Until today, when Rick had decided to make an example of me. "I asked you a question, Vera," Rick demanded, his voice cutting through my frozen shock. Behind him, Danny smirked, already pulling out her phone. I knew my humiliation would be circulating in the staff chat within minutes. "She's just a child," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "I can't let her go to school hungry." "Not your problem," Rick snapped, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "No more freebies or it comes from your check." The little girl abandoned her sandwich, scrambling to gather her backpack. Before I could reach her, she was out the door, a flash of yellow disappearing down the street. In my office now. His cramped back office smelled of cigarettes and cheap cologne. A warning notice lay on his cluttered desk. "Sign here," he said without looking up from his invoices. "Consider this your first and only warning about unauthorized discounts." "Rick, she's just a kid trying to—" "Not our problem," he cut me off. "Parents should feed their own kids. Sign it." I took the pen, my hand trembling slightly. I could explain how the girl counted pennies, how her clothes seemed more worn each day, how she always arrived alone. Instead, I simply signed. "Don't make me regret keeping you on," Rick added as I turned to leave. "Plenty of people would take your job tomorrow." That night, I lay awake in my studio apartment, replaying the day's events. I couldn't afford to lose this job. Rent was due, student loans weren't going anywhere, and waitressing positions that accommodated night classes were hard to find. But the thought of turning the girl away made me physically ill. Morning arrived with a decision. I would pay for the girl's breakfast myself in full, keeping the transaction completely separate from the diner's books. Rick couldn't object to my serving a legitimate paying customer, but 7 a.m. came and went with no sign of the yellow jacket. By 7:30, I found myself checking the door every few minutes, worry gnawing at my stomach. Had Rick's public humiliation scared her away? Was she sick? Or worse, had something happened to her? At 8:15, the diner's atmosphere shifted dramatically. Conversation died mid-sentence as a gleaming black SUV with tinted windows pulled up directly in front of the entrance. Two men in suits emerged first, scanning the area before opening the rear door. A tall man in an impeccably tailored black suit stepped out, his presence commanding attention without effort. Two more suited men flanked him as he entered. The breakfast crowd fell silent. Forks paused mid-bite. Rick emerged from the back office, eyes widening. He hurried forward, smoothing his rumpled shirt. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Waverly Diner. How can we help you?" His voice had transformed into something obsequious I'd never heard before. The man's sharp, intelligent eyes swept across the diner, ignoring Rick completely. "I'm looking for the person who's been helping my daughter," he stated, his deep voice controlled but revealing nothing about his intentions. I froze by the coffee station, pitcher in hand. The four bodyguards positioned themselves strategically around the diner, their posture professional but unmistakably vigilant. Rick's smile faltered. "I'm not sure I understand." "My daughter," the man repeated calmly. 10 years old, yellow jacket. She's been coming here for breakfast." I set down the coffee pitcher and stepped forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. "That's me," I said quietly. "I've been serving her." The man turned, studying my face for a long moment. His expression shifted from scrutiny to something softer, more vulnerable. "She hasn't eaten breakfast outside our home since her mother died," he said. "You're the first person she's spoken a complete sentence to in 3 years." The diner remained absolutely silent. Even the kitchen sounds had ceased. "I didn't know," I whispered. The man approached, extending his hand. "Nathan Fraser." Several gasps rippled through the diner. Even I recognized the name. Nathan Fraser, tech investor and philanthropist whose face occasionally graced business magazines. "My daughter is Emily," he continued. "After her mother's accident, she developed selective mutism. Therapists, specialists, medications. Nothing helped. Then yesterday, she handed her tutor a note about a kind waitress." He reached into his jacket and produced a folded paper. I recognized it immediately as the note I'd found under the milk glass the day before. In large, uneven handwriting. "You're the only one who talks to me without being scared. I like the milk every morning. Thank you, E." "This is the first time she's reached out to anyone," Nathan said, his composure cracking slightly. "I had to find out who you were." Rick stepped forward, his demeanor completely transformed. "Mr. Fraser, I can assure you our establishment always welcomes your daughter. In fact, I personally instructed Miss Sullivan to take special care of her." Nathan's gaze hardened as he turned to Rick. "Really?" "Because my security team reviewed your establishment before I entered. They overheard quite a different story from your staff." Rick paled visibly. Behind him, Danny had stopped filming and was slowly backing toward the kitchen. "Where is Emily today?" I asked, concern overriding my awe. "At home with a cold," Nathan answered. "She was upset about missing her breakfast here." He turned back to Rick, his tone measured but firm. "I don't need your apologies. What I need are people like her." He nodded toward me. "In my organization." From his pocket, he removed a business card, handing it to me. "Miss Sullivan, if you're interested in opening your own restaurant, I'd like to fully finance it." I stared at the card, my vision blurring with tears. "I don't understand." "You showed kindness to my daughter when she was invisible to everyone else," Nathan said simply. "I'd like to return that kindness." The diner's entrance chimed. A small figure in a yellow jacket slipped inside, followed by an older woman who must have been her caretaker. Emily, no longer anonymous, no longer just the girl, approached me slowly. For the first time, she looked directly into my eyes. "Will you still have egg sandwiches?" she asked, in a small but clear voice. I knelt to meet her gaze, tears flowing freely now. "Every single day if you want them." Emily smiled, a tiny, fragile thing, but unmistakably real. 1 month later, E&V Mornings opened its doors 6 blocks from Waverly Diner. The cozy cafe, its name a combination of Emily and Vera, featured warm lighting, comfortable seating, and a special corner designated for school children. A small sign on the wall read, "No child turned away. All students welcome." I had insisted on keeping prices affordable. The restaurant's business model included a suspended meal program where customers could prepay for food that would go to someone who couldn't afford it. Emily came every morning before school, her yellow jacket now accompanied by a small apron embroidered with the cafe's logo. She didn't speak much, but she helped arrange napkins and wrote the daily specials in her improving handwriting. Sometimes Nathan joined them, sitting quietly with his laptop while Emily worked alongside me. Other times, he sent the car to pick Emily up afterward, always with a generous tip and a note of thanks. Rick had sent me a lengthy email apologizing and offering my old job back with a substantial raise. I didn't respond. Several former Waverly Diner regulars now frequented E&V mornings instead. Martin, the elderly line cook, had joined my team, bringing his secret hash brown recipe with him. When local news caught wind of the story, reporters requested interviews. I declined most, but agreed to one brief statement. I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just refused to ignore a child who needed to be seen. The reporter pressed for more details about Nathan Fraser's involvement and the financial arrangement behind the cafe. I smiled. This isn't about money, it's about creating a space where kindness is the default, not the exception. On quiet afternoons, I sometimes caught Emily watching me with a thoughtful expression. She was slowly emerging from her shell, not in dramatic bursts, but in small, significant moments. She now greeted regular customers with nods, occasionally whispered comments to me about the pastry display, and had started keeping a journal of her own. One morning, Emily arrived with a carefully wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph of herself, smiling tentatively, holding an egg sandwich. Beneath it, in her distinctive handwriting, "Thank you for the milk when I was thirsty and the kindness when I was hungry." I hung it behind the counter, a quiet reminder that sometimes the most important acts of kindness are the ones no one else notices. Last week, I spotted Rick through the cafe window, standing across the street watching our busy morning service. Our eyes met briefly before he turned away. I felt no satisfaction in his discomfort, only gratitude that his public humiliation had led to this unexpected second chance. Emily tugged at my apron then, pointing to a new customer who had just walked in, a young boy, maybe 12, with worn shoes and careful eyes. Without a word, she grabbed an egg sandwich and glass of milk from the counter and brought it to his table herself. As I watched her small act of kindness, I realized something profound. When we're publicly shamed for our compassion, we have two choices: retreat into self-protection or double down on kindness. Emily had taught me to choose the second path, and in doing so, had helped me find not just a new career, but a purpose. The boy looked up at Emily with surprise as she set down his breakfast. She didn't say a word, just gave him a tiny nod of understanding before returning to my side. Sometimes the quietest voices teach us the loudest lessons about courage, about resilience, and about the unexpected ways justice eventually finds its way back to us all. The wine surged through my veins like liquid fire as I watched William Harrington's words form in slow motion. My fingernails dug crescents into my palms as the room around me blurred, his voice somehow both muffled and painfully clear. "My son deserves better than someone from the gutter," he announced to the room full of his country club friends, business associates, and his now frozen family members. Street garbage in a borrowed dress, pretending to belong in our world. 23 pairs of eyes swiveled between William and me, waiting to see if the nobody dating the prince would dare respond to the king. I felt each heartbeat in my throat as I carefully folded the napkin, fabric that probably cost more than my first apartment's rent. I placed it beside my untouched plate of overpriced salmon. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Harrington," I said, standing slowly, "and thank you for finally being honest about how you feel." My name is Zafira. I'm 32 and a self-made entrepreneur. This is the story of how I transformed a public humiliation into the most expensive lesson a man ever learned. "Zafira, don't!" Quinn grabbed my hand. I squeezed his fingers gently, then let go. "It's fine, love. Your father's right. I should know my place." The smirk on William's face was worth memorizing. That self-satisfied expression of a man who thought he'd won, who believed he'd finally driven away the street rat who dared to touch his precious son. If only he knew. I walked out of that dining room with my head high, past the Monet in the hallway, past the servants who avoided eye contact, past the Bentley in the driveway that William had made sure to mention cost more than I'd make in 5 years. I walked through the marble foyer and out to the circular driveway where my car was parked. Quinn caught up to me at my car, my sensible Toyota that William had sneered at when I'd pulled up. "I'm so sorry," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I had no idea he would—" I pulled him close, inhaling the scent of his cologne mixed with the salt of his tears. "This isn't your fault." "I'll talk to him, make him apologize." "No." I tucked a strand of his dark hair behind his ear. "No more apologizing for him, no more making excuses. He said what he's been thinking for the past year. At least now we know where we stand." "Zephyra, please don't let him ruin us." I kissed his forehead. "He can't ruin what's real, Quinn. I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" He nodded reluctantly, and I drove away from the Harrington estate, watching in my rearview mirror as the mansion grew smaller, its lights twinkling like stars I'd supposedly never reach. My phone started buzzing before I even hit the main road. I ignored it, knowing it was probably Quinn's mother, Rachel, trying to smooth things over, or maybe his sister, Patricia, offering awkward solidarity. They weren't bad people, just weak ones, too afraid of William to ever stand up to him. But I had more important calls to make. I voice-dialed my assistant as I merged onto the highway. "Danielle, I know it's late." "Miss Cross, is everything all right?" Danielle had been with me for 6 years, since before the world knew who Zephyra Cross really was. She could read my moods like a book. "Cancel the Harrington Industries merger." Silence. Then period. "Ma'am, we're supposed to sign papers on Monday. The due diligence is complete. Financing is secured." "I'm aware. Kill it?" "The termination fees alone will be—" "I don't care about the fees. Send the notice to their legal team tonight. Cite irreconcilable differences in corporate culture and vision." "Zephyra—" Danielle dropped the formalities, which she only did when she thought I was making a mistake. "This is a $2 billion deal. Whatever happened at dinner." He called me garbage, Danny, in front of a room full of people, made it clear that someone like me will never be good enough for his family, or by extension, his business. That bastard. Danielle's fingers were already flying across her keyboard. I could hear it through the phone. "I'll have legal draw up the termination papers within the hour. Want me to leak it to the financial press?" "Not yet. Let him wake up to the official notice first. We'll let the media have it by noon tomorrow." "With pleasure, ma'am. Anything else?" I thought for a moment. "Yes. Set up a meeting with Fairchild Corporation for Monday. If Harrington Industries won't sell, maybe their biggest competitor will—" "You're going to buy his rival instead?" "Why not? Garbage has to stick together, right?" I hung up and drove the rest of the way to my penthouse in silence. The city lights blurred past, each one a reminder of how far I'd come from the kid who'd slept in shelters and survived on free school lunches. William Harrington thought he knew me, thought he'd researched enough to understand what kind of woman was dating his son. He knew I'd grown up poor, that I'd started working at 14, that I'd put myself through community college and then university through sheer determination and an unhealthy amount of caffeine. What he didn't know was that the scrappy kid he looked down on had built a corporate empire while staying in the shadows, that Cross Technologies, the company his own firm was desperately trying to merge with to stay relevant in the tech age, was mine, that I'd spent the last decade acquiring patents, poaching talent, and strategically positioning myself to become the kingmaker in our industry. He didn't know because I'd kept it quiet, using holding companies and trusted executives as the face of my operations. I'd learned early that real power came from being underestimated, from letting blowhards like William think they held all the cards. As I pulled into my building's garage, my phone lit up with an incoming call. Harrington CFO Martin Keating. That was faster than expected. Martin had my personal number from our previous merger discussions, where we'd exchanged contact information for urgent matters. Zafira, it's Martin. I'm sorry to call so late, but we just received a notice from Cross Technologies terminating the merger agreement. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Martin. But we're set to sign Monday. The board has already approved. Shareholders are expecting. Then the board should have thought about that before their CEO publicly humiliated me at dinner tonight. Silence. Then quietly. Period. What did William do? Ask him yourself. I'm sure he'll give you his version. Good night, Martin. I hung up and headed to my penthouse, pouring myself a scotch and settling onto the balcony to watch the city sleep. Somewhere out there, William Harrington was about to have his evening ruined. I wondered if he'd make the connection immediately or if it would take him a while to realize that the garbage he dismissed controlled the one thing his company needed to survive the next fiscal year. My phone buzzed, Quinn calling. I let it go to voicemail, not trusting myself to separate my anger at his father from my love for him. He didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire, but some battles couldn't be avoided. By morning, my phone had logged 47 missed calls. William had tried reaching me 6 times himself, which must have been killing him. The great William Harrington reduced to repeatedly calling someone he declared garbage. I was reviewing quarterly reports over breakfast when Danielle called. The financial press got wind of the terminated merger. Bloomberg wants a statement. Tell them Cross Technologies has decided to explore other opportunities that better align with our values and vision for the future. Vague and devastating. I love it. She paused. Also, William Harrington is in the lobby. I nearly spit out my coffee. He's here? Showed up 20 minutes ago. Security won't let him up without your approval, but he's making quite a scene. Should I have him removed? No. I set down my mug, thinking. Send him up, but make him wait in the conference room for, let's say, 30 minutes. I'm finishing breakfast. You're evil. I'll prep conference room C, the one with the uncomfortable chairs. 45 minutes later, I walked into the conference room to find William Harrington looking significantly less imposing than he had the night before. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tailored suit rumpled. The man who'd lorded over dinner like a king now looked like what he was, a desperate CEO watching his company's future evaporate. Zafira, he stood when I entered, and I could see how much it cost him. Thank you for seeing me. I sat down without offering him a handshake. You have 5 minutes. He swallowed his pride like broken glass. I apologize for last night. My words were inappropriate. Inappropriate? I laughed. You called me garbage in front of your entire social circle. You humiliated me in your own home at your own table, while I was there as your guest and your son's girlfriend. I was drunk. No. I cut him off. You were honest. Drunk words, sober thoughts. You thought I was beneath you from the moment Quinn introduced us. Last night, you just finally said it out loud. William's jaw tightened. Even now, even desperate, he couldn't fully hide his disdain. What do you want? An apology? You have it. A public statement? I'll make one. Just, the merger needs to happen. You know it does. Why? Excuse me? Why does it need to happen? Explain to me why I should do business with someone who fundamentally disrespects me. William's face flushed. Because it's business. It's not personal. Everything is personal when you make it personal. I stood up. You researched me, right? Dug into my background, found out about the foster homes, the free lunch programs, the night shifts at warehouses to pay for textbooks. He nodded reluctantly. But you stopped there. You saw where I came from and assumed that defined me. You never looked at where I was going. I walked to the window, gesturing at the city below. Do you know why Cross Technologies is successful, William? Because you have good products. Because I remember being hungry. Because I remember being dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. Every person we hire, every deal we make, every product we develop, I ask myself if we're creating opportunity or just protecting privilege. I turned back to him. Your company represents everything I built mine to fight against. Old money protecting old ideas, keeping the door closed to anyone who didn't inherit their seat at the table. That's not, isn't it? Name one person on your board who didn't go to an Ivy League school. one executive who grew up below the poverty line, one senior manager who had to work 3 jobs to put themselves through community college. His silence was answer enough. The merger is dead, William. Not because you insulted me, but because you showed me who you really are. And more importantly, you showed me who your company really is. This will destroy us, he said quietly. Without this merger, Harrington Industries won't survive the next 2 years. Then maybe it shouldn't. I headed for the door. Maybe it's time for the old guard to make way for companies that judge people by their potential, not their pedigree. Wait. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over. What about Quinn? You're going to destroy his father's company, his inheritance. I paused at the door. Quinn is brilliant, talented, and capable. He doesn't need to inherit success. He can build his own. That's the difference between us, William. You see inheritance as destiny. I see it as a crutch. He'll never forgive you. Maybe not, but at least he'll know I have principles that can't be bought or intimidated away. Can you say the same? I left him there and went back to my office. Danielle was waiting with a stack of messages and a knowing look. Fairchild Corporation wants to meet Monday morning. They're very interested in discussing an acquisition. Good. Make sure William hears about it by this afternoon. Already arranged for the information to leak. She paused. Quinn is in your private office. My heart skipped. How long? About an hour. I brought him coffee and tissues. How did he know to come here? I asked. He called the office main line asking for you. When I told him you were in a meeting with his father, he asked if he could wait for you. Given the circumstances, I thought you wouldn't mind, Danielle explained. After leaving William in the conference room, I headed back to my private office where Danielle informed me Quinn was waiting. I found him curled up in my desk chair, eyes red but dry. He looked up when I entered and I saw his father's strength but his mother's kindness in his face. Hi, he said softly. Hi. I heard what you told him. Danielle let me watch on the conference room feed. I sat on the edge of my desk. And I think... He stood up, coming to stand between my knees. I think I'd been a coward, letting him treat you that way, making excuses, hoping it would get better. Quinn, nope. Let me finish. He took my hands. I've spent my whole life benefiting from his prejudices without challenging them. Last night, watching him, I was ashamed. Not of me, of him, of myself for not standing up to him sooner. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you'll have me, I want to build something new with you, without my family's money or connections or conditional approval. I pulled him close. Are you sure? He's right about one thing. Walking away from that inheritance is no small thing. He laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in days. Zephyra Cross, you just terminated a $2 billion merger because my father disrespected you. I think we'll figure out the money part. I love you, I said, meaning it more than ever. I love you too, even if you did just declare corporate war on my father. Especially because I declared corporate war on your father. Especially because of that, he agreed, kissing me. My phone buzzed. Danielle again. Ma'am, William Harrington is holding an emergency board meeting. Our sources say they're discussing reaching out to you directly over his head. I put the phone on speaker. Tell them Cross Technologies might be willing to discuss a merger with Harrington Industries under new leadership. Emphasis on new. Quinn's eyes widened. You're going to oust my father from his own company. I'm going to give the board a choice. Evolve or perish. What they do with that choice is up to them. He thought about it for a moment, then nodded. He won't go quietly. I wouldn't expect him to. This is going to get ugly. Probably. My mother will cry. Definitely. My sister will write another terrible song about family drama. God help us all. She smiled, and it was sharp and beautiful and a little bit dangerous. So when do we start? I smiled back. How about now? And that's how the nobody dating the princess became the king who toppled the kingdom. Not with a sword or an army, but with a simple truth. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And those who refuse to give it when it's earned, well, they learn the hard way that sometimes the garbage takes itself out and takes everything else with it. By the following Monday, William Harrington was no longer CEO of Harrington Industries. By Tuesday, Cross Technologies had announced a merger with the newly restructured company. By Wednesday, Quinn had accepted a position as our new head of strategic development, turning down her father's offer to fund a rival venture out of spite. And by Thursday? Well, by Thursday, William Harrington had learned the most expensive lesson of his life. Never call someone garbage unless you're prepared to be thrown out with it. 6 months later, Quinn and I were engaged, with plans for a small ceremony far away from her father's social circle. William hadn't spoken to either of us since his removal as CEO, though Quinn's mother called weekly, slowly rebuilding their relationship on new, more honest terms. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.